Welcome to the Dreamboat. Remember, you can join the DRI for just £30 a year. You get access to more content, including videos and discounts for our events. It's a great way of finding out more about our work, joining our dream community, and supporting this podcast. Details in the show notes and at driccpe.org.uk/membership.
Welcome to the Dreamboat podcast, a place where we talk about everything dreamy, all you wanted to know about dreams and where you might find some answers. My name is Laura Payne and I'm a psychotherapist and associate of the Dream Research Institute, the DRI, here in London, England. And I'm joined by fellow psychotherapist and TV presenter, Melinda Messenger.
Hello, I'm Melinda Messenger and I'm also part of the Dream Research Institute, and together we're a group of dream weavers and catchers, and we're called the Dreamboat because we are recording our podcast by the canal here at Little Venice in London. So listen out for the ducks.
I love talking about dreams, working with them and exploring them. So join us for this fortnightly series when we'll be looking at dreams, talking to experts in the field and answering your questions.
In the show notes, you will find ways of getting in touch with us and the team via the DRI website and on the standard online places such as Instagram and Facebook. And our social media links are all in the show notes. So let's now get on with the episode.
Well, this is the end of the series. It's our Q&A session, our traditional Q&A session. And I am really excited to invite Dave back to the redecorated Dreamboat. We have taken a few of the dream catchers down, so you'll be pleased to know that, Dave.
I feel very comfortable. Very happy to be back. I just can't stay away. Thanks for having me.
Well, you're the most important part of the team as director of the DRI, and this is very much your baby. And yeah, I'm thrilled that you're going to come back and do some Q&As with me to wrap up this series. So it's really lovely having you back on board. And we've had some great questions from the audience. So thank you for sending them in. And as always, as we say, keep dreaming and keep sharing your dreams, to use Dave's sign off, and also keep sending in your dreams. So these questions that we've put together, we're going to probably tackle 3 depending on time, but they are a sort of accumulation of several similar dreams that have been sent in. And I'm loving the first one, Dave, because I will hold my hand up. I do have toilet dreams. So this is an interesting one for me. So we've had a few questions from you saying, why do I dream about going to the toilet? And I know that Dave and I are going to make all the normal Freudian jokes in a minute.
Oh dear.
But what do you make of toilet dreams, Dave?
Well, first of all, I think that there's different kinds of toilet dreams as well. I'm not getting into the nitty-gritty, pardon the expression, but so there's what I hear and probably what I've experienced as well. There's the ones where you're dreaming that you need to go to the loo. You wake up, you need to go to the loo, and it's the feedback from your body telling you there's something going on.
It's mechanical.
There's that aspect to it as well. Yeah. Your brain and your sensory apparatus, your dreaming apparatus tries to wrap that into the narrative, just like it does with noises from outside and so on, until it becomes too insistent and you really have to wake up. All of which is, very kind of evolutionary, biologically based. We need to sleep through some disruptions, but we need to be woken by other disruptions. So all wrapped up in that. I'm more interested in the symbolic side of it, of course. And there are lots of experiences that I've been told and come across of dreams, toilet-related dreams, which are about kind of exposure, maybe, or it comes up quite often, sewage-related things. I was looking for a loo in a public place, and when I got there, the toilet exploded and all the sewage came out. And I think there's probably some interesting symbolism going on there about what it is that we're trying to get rid of and what it is that comes back and whether it's personal or collective and so on. Does that make sense to you,
Yeah,
Laura?
yeah. Well, when you said about the sewage dream, not one I've had actually, but that I can recall, obviously, I was thinking of the alchemical operation of putrefactio. So where change happens through something really quite gross. The transformation is in the gross. And I think if a client rocked up with that dream, I would be interested in what they saw in the gross part of the putrefaction there.
Yeah.
But also how that relates to them changing as a person.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, it's a natural process. And as we talked about with nightmares, it's your feelings about the image that make it scary if it's a nightmare. In this case, it's your feelings about the image that make it gross. On one hand, it's just, we put fertilizer on the garden and that helps it grow. Well, that's, it's rotten stuff. Yeah, it's putrefactio. Yeah. That's how it works. When it comes to our own bodies, there's, a big ick factor, of course, and there's all sorts of social things around it, and hygiene things that we have to be concerned about, sure. But it's this process of, the parallel, the metaphor, the symbol of what is it that we are trying to release or needing to release from our psyche, something that is no longer useful, something that has served its purpose, and now it needs to be let go. And then it has a purpose elsewhere. It transforms into something else. It feeds a further process. It feeds growth in the future. And if it's something that we're hanging on to, then we're hanging on to something that might be rotten and gross. And we need to let it go.
Yeah, I love how you describe that, and the sort of comparison with spreading manure onto fields and gardens and things. It's true. There is, the weird beauty in the transformation around that, and the letting go, I think, is something for all of us as a learning point. I really like that. I was also thinking when you talked about embarrassment and shame, I think for a lot of people, particularly the classic toilet dream is you're in a supermarket, for instance, and the toilets aren't private. There is a toilet in the aisle. You're left going with no cubicle or whatever. And I think for a lot of people, that's their sort of toilet dream. And the association, arguably, with that and shame or embarrassment. And also being exposed, as you say, it's an exposure dream, whatever the exposure might be for you in your psyche sense.
Yeah. So there's a whole range there that we've talked about, and I think it was Carol who asked the original question for us, wasn't it? And with Carol, she didn't really say, she says, I'm always wanting to go to the toilet, but I either can't find one or it's damaged. And it feels to me that it's on that kind of borderland between, as we get older, you probably do need to use the bathroom in the middle of the night. So maybe the body is kind of going, hello, wake up. But it's interesting. I can't find one or it's damaged. And it's like something about something incomplete or, something. It's like there's not the place where I can let go of what I need to let go of. It's not the right time, or something's broken.
Yeah, or your basic needs aren't able to be met. And I think that's quite an interesting one. I mean, and we've talked so far, and we haven't even mentioned Freud and the anal phase, which for Freud was an important part of the ego's development, and normally happened around the age of 3 when you were being potty trained. And whatever happened in your life, were you stuck in the anal phase? Is that part of why we have these dreams that toilet dreams that surface, obviously dreams that surface at night, which is exploring aspects of that phase, a Freudian would probably say.
Yeah, exactly. And there's the common expression around somebody being a bit anal, which usually means that they're obsessed with control or focused on control. And that's what that phase of development is about. You control your bowels, you control your movements, and you're rewarded for that.
Yeah. And also you have a control over your sense of self. So there's an aspect of power involved with this as well.
Yeah. So it's always interesting to look at that then, isn't it? That's a very good point, Laura. That what is it about that aspect of yourself that is about self-control? Maybe it's discipline, maybe it's got a positive side or a negative side to it, but what is it about that for you, and what are the associations around it?
I find it interesting when those type of dreams pop up, what's actually happening in your life at that time. Because it's a dream that I think for most people who have it as a regular dream, it comes back at different phases in your life, and you could sort of go for years and not dream it, and then it would pop back up again. Often in very similar contexts. You and I have talked about worlds. Where are you where you're perhaps on a toilet in public? Is it the same type of place? Is it a different place? All of those tell you a lot about what needs possibly aren't being met that you want to have met in some way, or where you're feeling shame in your life or exposure in your life.
Yeah, exactly. There's a very big difference between it being in your own home and that kind of internal feeling and how your needs might be met and how you relate to that in yourself, and it being in a public place, as you said before. And what is, that idea of the public shame or public exposure and what might come up around that.
Yeah. I once had a dream about a toilet attendant, and she turned up on a fairly regular basis. She was from India because she was dressed in a sari, so I made that. And she kept this toilet very, very clean, and she kept the toilet area very, very clean. And obviously, I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but my therapist and I had great fun with it for quite a while, and I drew her.
Okay.
And she was quite an interesting spirit guide in some way, a dream guide. It opened up a really interesting piece of work. So, yes, it's... one wants to make a joke about, let's not take the piss over this. But, it's rich in imagery for obvious reasons, and rich in personal, very dark and deep emotional part of oneself.
Yeah, I love that you got in touch with your inner toilet attendant.
Exactly.
It says something to me about that it is it's this necessary psychic process, and there are aspects of our psyche, they're archetypal or split off parts of our personalities that are looking after our processes and sometimes blocking our processes as well, interfering with them. But you found somebody who's there, whose job is to make sure that things can be released and things go where they're meant to be. They're not being held on and putrefying in the mind, in the psyche.
Yeah, very nicely put. Thank you, Dave. So thank you for your toilet questions. That's a sort of brief stab at them, but pay attention, and they're interesting and always fun to work with. I suppose the bigger question is to ask yourself, what needs are not being met, or what fears are being surfaced around this. And that's probably a great way of trying to approach them if you're working by yourself with this material. So I think it was Carol and a few other people who had written in about this. So thank you very much indeed. So our next question, which I find very interesting, is about funerals and seeing a funeral, either your own or the funeral of others, in a dream. And again, Dave, what do you make of that one?
I mean, so much. We could do a whole episode on it, exactly. Of course. We were just talking about the alchemical process of putrefaction. This is about mortification, mortifactio in the Latin version for alchemy. I think that's where my mind goes immediately. And again, it's these natural processes. We know that dying is part of life. That's how things are let go and renewed and reborn. And there's the question, I guess, and I'd be curious about what you have to say about this, Laura. There's the personal side of it, and then there's the collective side of it. Every culture in the world has funeral rites of some kind, so it's something that we need. We need the ceremony and the ritual when somebody dies, and there's lots of different ways of doing it, but there's always something. So it's quite universal. So I'd be curious to know for the person who wrote in, was there a recent funeral? Is this something that connects to something personal? Or is this something that is, in a more general symbolic sense, about, again, something dying off in the psyche, something that needs to be let go, and about ritualizing that?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, how both these dreams, both the toilet dreams and the funeral dreams, have a very common theme, that there's something about something that needs to be let go so that you can transform. And obviously, the funeral dream feels a really massive piece of transformation. What actually has to die for you to be reborn? I mean, this sits in the heart of so many religions as a concept anyway. But, the old self has to die for the new self to be reborn. The image of the snake, for instance, is, part of that. What of your skin needs to be shed for you to start again in your new transformed self? And death is, a very big final sort of slice in the road on that. So for somebody to dream a funeral, what we're looking at also is the ritualistic operation of death. This is a funeral is a celebration of someone's life. So what is about dying, this part of the old self dying, needs to have a ritual around it so that the new self can feel properly transformed and ready to go, be reborn. Feels an important part of this. And I think if a client presented this to me, I would say, what ritual needs to happen? What is the old self? What is the new self? Because there's something deeply profound about it being expressed through the notion of death and
Absolutely.
the notion of a funeral.
Yeah, yeah. And you've really kind of twigged something for me there, because we talk about change. Psychotherapy is about change, about transformation. And we're focused on that all the time. And there can sometimes be this attitude that change is about, getting away from something that we don't want to be and moving towards something we do want to be. And that sense of kind of rejecting the old way or the bad habit or whatever it might be. And if you just reject and if you just push it away, then you actually put energy into that and it's hard to move forward. What we can do instead is try and understand the purpose of that old way of being or that old habit, whatever it might be, that old perspective. It was there for a reason. It served its purpose. We thank it and we let it go. And I think that's maybe what is in that ritualization aspect of it, to say, yeah, you know what, that served me, whatever it is, that helped me survive. Childhood usually is what it is, but it helped me get to this point. It helped me stay together. But now it's limiting me. So thank you and goodbye. And I feel that's a very powerful message to have within ourselves when we look at change and what it is that we need to let go.
I was thinking of the old lines out of Shakespeare's Julius Caesar, and I'm not good at quoting things exact, but I haven't come to bury, I think in Mark Antony says, I haven't come to bury Caesar, I've come to praise him. And again, there's that part of showing respect to that old self that you've decided to sacrifice or kill off or whatever it is in some way, recognizing that you're ready to step into the next phase, and that those moments come with deep respect.
Yeah.
And honoring. I think that's the word
Absolutely.
I'm looking for, honoring.
Yeah. And within that, it's honoring our feelings as well. We always talk about how the origin of dreams is in a feeling, the feeling that then needs to connect to the images that become the dream and become the narrative that we have. And so for this person who's written in, and for anybody who's having this kind of dream, be interested to know what are the feelings that are present in this funeral. Because, I mean, I've been to a few funerals in waking life, and there's different kinds. There's the ones where we say, well, they had a good innings and we love them. And there's the ones which are, tragic and they went too soon, and maybe there's anger about how it happens, or, there's all sorts of different feelings that can come up in real life. And it's the same thing about, what's the dream funeral? Is this, do you allow yourself to be sad about how things were, how things had to be? And being sad, again, is a way of letting it go, acknowledging what was there so that you can move beyond it. And if you don't allow yourself to have the sadness, you can't move beyond. But what about the other? There might be mixed feelings of different kinds. There might be something of what's wrapped up in that sense of loss and the unknown about what comes next. And there can be anger. There can be all sorts of different feelings coming up.
Yeah. All the normal sort of stages associated with death and grief. I was also thinking, while you're talking, you and I are talking as if we're seeing our own funeral. But if it is someone in particular, what are you, again, as a therapist, you say, so what are your associations with that person? Who do they represent for you? What of them do you feel you want to kill off, either as a role in your life in the waking world or whatever they represent for you? What is it that you're being asked of what they represent within you? What are you being asked to sort of say goodbye to and get rid of, for want of a better way of describing it?
Absolutely, yeah. And it might be the image that you hold of a person, which gets in the way of you seeing the actual person as well. So, we see it most often, I think, with parents and people holding a childhood image of their parents as, they're supposed to know, they're supposed to have all the answers, they're supposed to be right. And I don't understand why they're so wrong all the time. And at some point you let that image go and you go, oh, right, it's a human being, it's a person, and they get things right and they get things wrong. And I can relate to them in that way. But that image has to be let go, which means it has to die from the psyche and it has to be buried, and then something else can replace it. Yeah.
I think we should also say here that we're not talking about ancestors and people who've passed over coming into dreams. This is specifically about the notion of the funeral as a ritual within a dream, whatever format the ritual is taking, whether it's a coffin. I mean, if it's being buried, that's interesting because, again, that's very much an earthing and would probably be seen as I was going to say in alchemical terms, a coagulatio image, that something needs to be returned to the earth for the transformation to take place. And so, we're not talking about seeing people who have died in your dreams, members of family, friends. We're talking about the actual ritual of the funeral itself in whatever format it takes. And that itself is of interest.
It is, yeah. And I see it for people who haven't listened to previous episodes. We've done an episode on alchemy previously, where we talk about the different stages and operations there, a very brief overview. But just to say in this instance that the image of a funeral, which might include, as you say, burial and so on, or not, I see it as in a kind of a dyad, a pairing with the images of marriage, the conjunctio. There are these significant stages that need to happen in order for us to grow. So something needs to die off so that there's space for something new to come into being. So there's that rebirth phase. And there's the marriage, the union of opposites. When we start to realize that those oppositions in ourselves, that ambivalence, whatever it might be, that actually it's part of a bigger whole, and that starts to come together. And it's not an intellectual process as I'm describing. It's about the images and it's about the feelings and us being able to relate to a wholeness. Really, really important in our internal psychological processes, our deep psychological processes. And spiritual processes. And the funeral is another kind of set of images around that. The death, the burial, the grieving, the letting go, all of that wrapped up. It's so important for us to be able to move forward.
Yeah. While you were talking, you were reminding me of one of those lovely alchemical images of the king and the queen. So the royal couple, the royal marriage as such, the royal conjunctio. but they're both in their coffins. So there's this amalgamation of those two concepts. I'll try and find a copy of that image and put it in the show notes, because it's very powerful and surreal as well, because it puts together everything that you've just said, Dave. It's a very powerful, like a lot of these alchemical images, really powerful image and illustration. So thank you for the funeral question. As you can see, it's energised us in many ways and opened up not a coffin, but a Pandora's box of stuff for us to discuss. And so our very last question, which is one I hear more and more. I don't know about you, Dave, but I hear this on quite a lot now, where people say that they've had a fitful night of dreams and they've woken unrested, and they haven't been able to pinpoint why, but they felt the dreams were intense and heavy. Not necessarily nightmares, but there's an intensity that makes them exhausted when they wake. So again, what do you make of that one, Dave?
First of all, I think it really depends on the individual and how do they relate to that, because it might be it's happening at a certain stage, a certain period of life. You've got a lot on your mind. You're going through something, and that mental and emotional processing doesn't stop when you go to sleep, and so it's quite difficult to be rested at night. But I'm aware that there are people who also have this kind of on an ongoing basis. It's how they dream, it's how they sleep, and it's very difficult to feel rested. It's not a stage, something like that. So that's one sort of initial distinction to make. I mean, have you known anybody who's had this experience before?
Yeah, well, I'm intrigued because I think post-COVID, with the notion of brain fog, a lot of people are beginning to find that when they wake, they're feeling exhausted and wonder whether it's linked with intense dreaming. And so post-COVID, I am intrigued by it. I often find that people who have done a lot of, for want of a better description, looked at their iPhone or looked at a phone or looked at an iPad or something digital, a digital screen before going to bed, often find it difficult to sleep. I know this has been well recorded and researched now, but that itself leads on to the brain feeling overactivated while trying to sleep and not being able to calm itself down. So that I'm really interested in, and whether that promotes an intensity of dreaming in some way. So I would really urge anybody who might be going through these periods of waking up and feeling exhausted, watch how you go to sleep. I know it's called good sleep hygiene, and there are lots of tips and guides out there for good sleep hygiene. Play around with them, find what suits you, so that you can at least try to fall asleep in a more rested fashion. And hopefully the psyche will take a cue from that and give you more restful style dreams. I think that's one area I would think about it. But if it is a highly energized dream, then what is happening in your life currently, that means that you might need to be thinking a lot more about various mindfulness techniques, so that you are allowing the brain to rest during the day before sleeping.
Yeah. Know any good books about mindfulness, Laura?
Well, I do have one, yes, my own. 9 Steps to a Mindful Life. Yeah, and that's not including meditating. I always joke, there's a sneaky extra chapter 10, which is about meditating. But you can live a mindful life without sitting and zenning out on the floor, humming Om and whatever. And to be honest, a lot of mindfulness research shows that even if you just spend 10 to 20 minutes in a state of being present, which is hard, as anybody will tell you. You'd think sitting on the floor would be the easiest thing in the world, but to sit on the floor and just empty your mind and not let it wander, which is what minds are programmed to do, is, obviously really hard. But there are lots of different exercises out there. Just to go and have a look around YouTube. I recommend Professor Mark Williams' work as well, which you can find on YouTube. I mean, if you Google, he's written several books on mindfulness. A lot of them have really set the mindfulness world alight in the modern day mindfulness world. And so Mark Williams, very good. John Kabat-Zinn being the other one as well in the States. So, yeah, I mean, is the psyche asking you to try and find some space in your mind during the waking hours? Could be another way of interpreting, waking up and feeling unrefreshed, basically.
It's maybe worth just naming, since we've touched on it, some of those sleep hygiene factors just very briefly. So having alcohol within a couple of hours of going to bed, caffeine, of course, or anything caffeinated, including chocolate, can affect your sleep and change your sleep cycles. Being on your screens, as you said, and also just general stimulation and stress. If you're running on cortisol, stress hormone, adrenaline, through the day, it doesn't just switch off in the evening. So exactly what you're talking about of recognizing where those patterns are in your waking life so that you can wind down and go to sleep. That being said, there are lots of different kinds of sleepers. There's not a normal way to sleep. Everyone has a different biology and a different mind, and so some people do just sleep lighter than others and are more inclined to be disturbed. Having lots of dreams sometimes correlates with lighter sleep. You wake up a little bit and therefore you remember more of those dreams. You're kind of going in and out of them, as opposed to that really deep, heavy sleep where you're less likely to remember the dreams that you're having. But not everybody follows exactly that. There's the general sleep patterns that if you look online, you can see about the stages of sleep and so on. But not everybody goes into them for the same amount of time or to the same depth. So being able to accept that we are all different is an aspect of it as well.
I was thinking of Fitbits and, some of these personal health devices will actually record your sleep, and you'll see that each night it's slightly different. And each night we all go into light sleep and we'll wake and then fall back to sleep again. We're just unaware of it. But that's what I love about, I've got a Fitbit, and that's what I love about looking at and tracking. And if you wake suddenly from sleep, you can see that you actually were in REM sleep, which is where most dreams that we remember tend to occur in that sleep phase. And so, if you have one of these devices, have a look at what times, whether you're regularly waking up at a certain time and what that might be. That might be quite informative as well. So there's a lot of material out there to support you in helping you sleep better, or find some space in your life, I think, is one of the things I would say. But, Dave, while you were talking, I was also thinking, and I know we've joked about this before, but for lucid dreamers, they're so busy trying to record and remember and being involved in their dream, particularly in the early phases. I'm not a regular lucid dreamers. This is a bit different. The pros, I would say. But if you're playing around with lucid dreaming, and trying to do it, you will wake unrefreshed because you spent most of your life trying to actively engage with your dreams. So the brain's not switching off in the same way.
Yeah. I mean, we go to these dream conferences, don't we? And I always feel like you can spot the new lucid dreamers because they've got big bags under their eyes.
Exactly.
Don't forget to sleep in between your lucid dream experiments, please. Give yourself some nights off to properly rest.
Exactly.
It's so true. It's probably worth saying a little bit about some of the factors around unwellness potentially that relate to this. So depression correlates with sleep disruption, and that can be kind of biologically brain based as well, and medication can potentially help with that, as can therapy. There are other forms of sleep and dream disturbance. So there's nightmare disorder, where having constant intense nightmares can relate to trauma. Sometimes it's about the mind kind of being in a habit of having those same feelings and those same images going round and round and round. So if that's the case,
related.
Yeah, exactly. If that's the case, and you've got the sleep hygiene factors figured out, and it seems like it's not going away or it's getting worse, do talk to a professional. I think that's really important. And just to say as well, I have a friend who has had a lifetime of really intense, exhausting dreams, not necessarily nightmares, but they're weird and they're wonderful and they're epic and sometimes disturbing and sometimes joyous, but they lead to him waking up and feeling exhausted all the time. And he's interested in dreams, he's interested in psychology, but he lives in a country where cannabis can be given on a prescription, and he uses that from time to time to put him into deeper sleep medically. And it seems to help him just feel a little bit more rested from time to time. And, again, he's an energetic person and he's got a very active mind, but he's a lifelong meditator. So, sometimes, we're all just different. And sometimes you can find something that helps. I don't know long-term if that's going to work for him. We'll see. But you have to kind of experiment and don't feel like there's something wrong with you. It's just that we're all different.
Yeah, nicely put. Yeah, and I'm intrigued how your friend has sort of looked at finding other resources to help with this.
Yeah.
And like meditation isn't the answer to everything. So very much so. Well, thank you very much for all of you who have written in with these questions. Love them. Keep them coming. And here we are at the end of our 5th series. Can't believe it. So thanks to obviously Dave and Melinda and also Maria, who's also joined us as a co-host. And for all of our guests. I know, it's fun, isn't it? And all of our guests that have joined us this series, thank you for coming on board and sharing your expertise with our audience. We're really grateful.
Yes. And thank you again to all the people who wrote in with questions. Really appreciate it. We didn't even touch the surface of how many questions that we had. Hopefully we'll get to some more at another time. So thank you very much for everyone who did send them in, and we'll respond via the podcast if and when we can. And just keep them coming, because we do find that people tend to ask some of the same questions. So your question is not just for you, it's for everyone. We really appreciate it.
So, standard ending here, I'm thinking, Dave. So from me, sweet dreams.
And for me, keep dreaming and keep sharing your dreams.
So, thank you for joining us for this week's episode. Don't forget to like us and leave comments on your favourite podcast platform. As I'm sure you know, that's the way we build an audience for the Dreamboat podcast, and also to spread news about dreaming. And as we said, there are many ways you can share your dreams at the DRI, the Dream Research Institute.
Yes, we have courses, events, and workshops, and we want to hear from you. So check out the show notes for links, or find us on Instagram and on our Facebook page and on our website at driccpe.org.uk. And if you want to explore your dreams further, or you would like to support us, you can join the DRI as a member for just £30 a year. As a member, you will get discounts for all of our events and short courses. You'll get our newsletter with latest dream research news, and we'll also be adding other special member benefits during the year. Of course, members' dreams will always be given preference for reading on the podcast Dream of the Week slot. So go to the link on the show notes and become a DRI member today. Keep dreaming and keep sharing your dreams.